I can still recall the warm grin my grandfather shared with me from across his weathered dining table. He instilled in me the belief that true riches lie in how we live our lives, not in the digits of our bank balance. When he passed away and left me his estate, I never imagined that his inheritance would reveal the true nature of those closest to me. Years ago, my parents walked away when I refused to conform to their ambitions, but now they returned, flashing polished smiles and wearing designer outfits, eager to oversee what they saw as their golden opportunity. Before I share how my parents' smiles vanished for good in that courtroom, let me know where you're reading from. Leave a comment below and follow for more tales of family deception and surprising justice. Raised in a quiet Milwaukee, Wisconsin neighborhood, I grew up understanding that my parents, Richard and Margaret, measured success and authority through wealth. Our home buzzed with talk of social status and climbing the ranks of society. Though we enjoyed a comfortable middle-class life, my parents behaved as if one clever deal would catapult us into high society. My childhood was marked by moments of financial control. At 14, when I wanted to join the school orchestra, my father agreed to buy me a clarinet only if I kept a flawless report card. A single A- in biology prompted him to threaten to sell it. "Money is leverage, Ethan," he'd say. "Those who hold the purse strings set the terms." My mother was just as strategic. For my 16th birthday, she gifted me a car but kept the title in her name. "We paid for it, so we decide when you drive it," she declared. When I chose to volunteer at a community center instead of attending a high-profile gala with her associates, she confiscated the keys. College choices sparked another conflict. I longed to study environmental science, but they insisted on finance. "We'll only cover tuition for a degree that pays off," my father stated. When I sought student loans to follow my passion, they blocked my applications by withholding their financial details. At 22, I broke free. With $400 saved from part-time work, I took a bus to Portland, determined to carve out my own path. My cramped apartment became my haven. My starter job at a conservation nonprofit barely covered groceries, but for the first time, no one used money to control my decisions. My parents limited contact to stiff holiday calls, each laced with jabs about my wasted potential and how I'd never succeed without their guidance. I accepted the distance as the cost of independence. One person never sought to steer me, my grandfather, Walter, a self-made man who ran a small carpentry business through years of honest labor. He lived simply despite his success. During childhood summers at his riverside cottage, he taught me to whittle, garden, and prioritize integrity. "Money's just a resource, Ethan," he'd say as we floated in his old rowboat. "It can create beauty or cause harm, depending on who wields it." After I moved to Oregon, our fishing trips turned into weekly calls. We'd discuss my new life, his woodworking projects, and the books we loved. He never judged my modest apartment or low-paying job, instead praising my courage to stand on my own. When Walter turned 88, his health faltered. I took unpaid leave to spend his final months with him. In those quiet days, we had profound talks about life and legacy. Sometimes, between his medications, he'd drop cryptic remarks I only later understood. "I've been observing, Ethan," he said one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon. "Some folks reveal their true selves when they think no one's watching." Another time, as I helped sort his files, he gripped my hand and said, "I'm making things right, son. Some lessons are taught after we're gone." I held his calloused hand when he took his last breath 3 months later. His loss carved an unfillable void in my heart, no wealth could mend. He loved me for who I was, not what he could shape me into. 3 days after his funeral, I got a call from Edward Thompson, Walter's lawyer. His tone was professional yet gentle as he told me I was the primary heir to Walter's estate. "The will reading is set for next Friday," he said. "Your grandfather insisted all family be present." Stunned, I thanked him, still grappling with the news. Walter never hinted at leaving me anything significant. I assumed his modest cottage and savings would be split among relatives. Hours after Walter's obituary appeared in the local paper, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. My mother's voice dripped with false warmth. "Ethan, dear, we just learned about poor Walter. We're heartbroken. Your father and I are flying in to help with everything." Their sudden interest after years of silence felt suspicious, but grief muddled my thoughts. Maybe Walter's passing could mend our fractured family. I agreed to pick them up at the airport, hoping for sincere reconciliation. That hope faded when they stepped off the plane. My father flaunted a flashy new watch, and my mother wore a designer ensemble unfit for a morning visit. Their first questions were about Walter's cottage, not his final days or my grief. At the simple memorial Walter had wanted, my parents networked like it was a corporate event. My father quizzed Walter's fishing buddies about local real estate. My mother eyed the antique mantel clock, murmuring about its resale value. "What a shame," I overheard my father tell a cousin. "A man like Walter deserved a lavish farewell, not this low-key gathering. But we'll ensure his legacy is handled right." Before the memorial ended, they'd moved their suitcases into Walter's cottage, claiming the main bedroom to organize things properly. I watched, speechless, as they inventoried valuables, debating what to sell or keep. "That rickety boat has to go," my father said of the rowboat where I learned life's greatest lesson. "We could get a sleek yacht instead, something worthwhile." My mother tagged furniture, already redecorating in her mind. "With some upgrades, this place could fetch a fortune," she said, ignoring that I lived 600 miles away with no plans to return. Their assumptions grew bolder. Over dinner, they talked about correcting Ethan's financial missteps and outlined how they'd guide my share of the inheritance, as if they'd already claimed it. "You've always been reckless with money," my father said, sipping Walter's rare bourbon. "Good thing we're here to keep you from blowing this chance." My mother agreed. "We gave up everything to raise you right. Now we'll finally see some reward." Their old tactics resurfaced, guilt over their sacrifices, hints I owed them for basic parenting, suggestions I was too careless to handle wealth. They dangled promises of luxury trips alongside subtle threats about family duty. By the day of the will reading, they were planning their cut of Walter's estate, discussing a beach condo in California and investment deals with Walter's old partners. The law firm of Thompson and Associates spanned the 12th floor of a city high-rise. The waiting area boasted plush chairs, mahogany walls, and a skyline view Walter would have admired for its artistry, not its grandeur. As relatives arrived, my parents acted as self-appointed hosts, shaking hands and chatting as if running the show. My mother wore a fresh designer dress, her diamond earrings glinting. My father's tailored suit and silver cufflinks screamed success, poised to take charge. "Ethan's overwhelmed," I heard my father tell my Aunt Clara. "Luckily, we know how to handle large assets and can steer him through this." My mother added, "We've already spotted some prime investment options for the estate. Once it's settled, we'll ensure everyone gets their fair share." Their confidence verged on hubris as they made promises to relatives. Uncle George was told the vintage motorcycle collection would, slipping further away with every passing day. I didn't know how to bridge the gap between us, how to honor Lily's memory without tearing apart what was left of our family. The next morning, I called our therapist and booked an emergency session. I didn't know if it would help, but I had to try. For Lily. For Sarah. For all of us. In Walter's plain-spoken tone, to my cherished grandson, Ethan, I've watched you become a man of honor and independence, despite hardships. You chose a tough road of self-reliance over compromising your values for ease. That choice proves the character I always saw in you. I've also seen, with deep regret, the actions of my son Richard and his wife Margaret. They've consistently used money to control, not support, you throughout your life. Their absence during your struggles and their sudden return now, when wealth is at stake, reveals their true priorities. My father squirmed, and my mother's pen froze. The room was deathly quiet. Edward read on, "Thus, I make these distributions. To my son Richard Peterson and his wife Margaret, I leave $1,000 each, a token reflecting the transactional relationship they chose with their son. The entirety of my remaining estate goes to my grandson Ethan Peterson, with the clear condition that his parents have no access to or influence over these assets. Any attempt by Richard or Margaret Peterson to challenge this will or to impose control over these assets will lead to their nominal inheritance being forfeited and contributed to wildlife preservation efforts." The quiet in the room shifted into a strain so intense it felt almost electric. My father's cheeks turned crimson, while my mother's complexion went ashen. Her notebook slid from her grasp and hit the floor with a noise that reverberated through the shocked space. "This is absurd," my father finally exploded, rising so abruptly that his chair toppled over. Walter was obviously not in his right mind. "We insist on reviewing the formal paperwork." Edward calmly pushed the documents across the table. "The will has been duly prepared with 2 witnesses and notarized per state regulations. Moreover, Walter foresaw your response and arranged additional materials." He gestured to one of the junior lawyers, who linked the laptop to a mounted display. Soon after, my grandfather's image appeared in a recorded video. He was seated in his office, attentive and poised, addressing the lens directly. "If this footage is being shown, it indicates Richard and Margaret have disputed my choice," Walter started, his tone firm and distinct. "I wish to affirm without doubt that I am fully competent mentally and physically. My physician has verified this, and health records have been submitted to my lawyer." He adjusted his position a bit, his look growing sterner. "I reached this conclusion after long-term scrutiny. Richard and Margaret have repeatedly employed economic pressure to dominate and influence Ethan across his lifetime. They cut off aid when he selected science over commerce, intimidated and demeaned him when he sought autonomy, and deserted him completely when he declined to adhere to their directives." Walter's gaze appeared to pierce straight at my parents as he went on. "They displayed no concern for his well-being over 8 years, offering no help during times of difficulty. Their abrupt return aligning exactly with my failing health and approaching death exposes their real intentions." My mother started to weep theatrically, while my father paced the meeting area. "This is defamation. We've always sought what's best for Ethan. Walter has turned him against us," but the playback pressed on unyieldingly. "I have recorded 17 particular cases of economic coercion, including blocked loan forms, revoked educational funding as penalty, and intentional undermining of Ethan's initial professional prospects when he rejected their preferred route. These records are attached in the private supplement to my will. My grandfather's tone eased a touch. "This choice stems not from spite but from safeguarding. Ethan merits the opportunity to shape his own destiny without the weight of coercion that has defined his bond with his parents. My wish is that this legacy will release him permanently from their sway." As the video concluded, my father pivoted to me, his approach changing swiftly from fury to bargaining. "Ethan, you realize this isn't fair. We're your parents. We merit what?" "Precisely." I cut in, astonishing myself with my composed tone. "A payout for vanishing from my life for 8 years. Reimbursement for appearing only when there's wealth to claim." My mother attempted another tactic, tears flowing flawlessly down her face without smudging her cosmetics. "We've always cherished you, Ethan. Your grandfather misread our motives. We can resolve this as kin, divide the legacy, as Walter would have genuinely desired." I gazed at her, truly observed her, maybe for the first time as a grown man. I perceived not a parent lamenting a bereavement or worried for her child, but an actor enacting a part crafted to secure a particular monetary result. In that instant, something shattered and realigned within me. "No," I stated, plainly, the word lingering in the space between us. 8 years of self-sufficiency had transformed me more than they comprehended. I was no longer the yielding child who could be influenced by remorse or scheming. My father's features tightened. "After all we've provided for you, what exactly have you provided in the last 8 years?" I questioned, maintaining an even voice. When I was surviving on canned soup for every meal because my conservation role scarcely paid the bills, where were you? When I required an operation 2 years back and arranged installments with the clinic, did you reach out even once? My mother jumped in. We were allowing you room to develop self-reliance. No, I interrupted her. You were penalizing me for not sticking to your agenda. The sole relative who supported me was Grandpa Walter. He phoned weekly. He mailed supply boxes when funds were scarce. He traveled over to assist after my procedure. I rose, gaining resolve from the recollection of Walter's serene insight. What you're doing at this moment, emerging only when there's fortune to acquire, is precisely why Walter issued this ruling. My father's expression twisted with anger. We'll fight this will. Walter was evidently declining mentally. Edward Thompson cleared his throat. Mr. Peterson, I'd highly recommend avoiding baseless claims about your father's cognitive condition. As seen in the footage, he completed a thorough mental evaluation merely 2 weeks prior to endorsing this will. The health paperwork is comprehensive and definitive. Additionally, he proceeded, unveiling another binder. Walter expected a possible dispute and readied himself. He gathered notarized declarations from impartial outsiders concerning behavioral trends. Challenging this will would prove costly and, honestly, humiliating for you. Aunt Clara, who had remained silent, abruptly stood. I believe we've all grasped what Walter intended. And truthfully, Richard, all he described aligns with what I've witnessed for years in how you handled Ethan. Other relatives murmured assent, decades of unvoiced insights at last gaining validation. My parents collected their items quickly. My father proclaimed boldly that we'd hear from their legal team. As they rushed to the door, my mother spun around, trying one last ploy. If you permit this to proceed, Ethan, you'll no longer be our child. I held her stare firmly. I ceased being your child the day I understood your affection was contingent on my compliance. Grandpa Walter was more of a guardian to me than either of you ever proved. Following the session, I went back to Walter's cottage to discover my parents hurriedly stuffing precious objects into their bags, paintings, crystal, and even Walter's service medals. When I challenged them, my father asserted they were ancestral treasures that Walter would have wished for them to possess. When they declined to relinquish the goods, I had no choice but to summon the authorities to remove them from the premises. As officers oversaw their exit, my mother whispered that I'd rue this disloyalty forever. My father vowed economic devastation via prolonged court fights. Faithful to their promise, they engaged costly lawyers to dispute the will, citing undue pressure. The ensuing 6-month courtroom struggle merely uncovered further proof backing Walter's choice. Their legal team found nothing to bolster assertions of intellectual decline or coercion. When the judge ultimately rejected their suit outright, declaring that the proof strongly endorses the late individual's worries about economic dominance, my parents launched one ultimate bid to bargain, proposing to abandon all subsequent demands for a simple 20% of the holdings. My reply stayed resolute. No. The period after the legal conflict was both emancipating and profoundly hurtful. Although I'd kept sentimental separation from my parents for years, the permanence of our rift created an inescapable emptiness. Certain evenings, I'd perch on Walter's veranda, examining vintage family snapshots, grieving not what existed, but what might have been. However, with every week that passed, I sensed the burden of their demands and scheming easing. For the initial time, I could choose without weighing the sentimental toll of their discontent. The legacy itself stayed mostly intact in the portfolios Walter had set up, overseen by investment experts he had meticulously chosen for their skill and honesty. When I was at last prepared to handle the holdings deliberately, my initial step was founding the Walter Peterson Trust for Conservation Learning, allocating $1 million to offer grants and study chances in the area I'd always aspired to explore. The trust emphasized aiding learners whose relatives were unable or unwilling to help with schooling costs. I acquired a modest home close to a wildlife sanctuary, nothing lavish, but featuring a studio where I could uphold Walter's custom of crafting feeders for birds and a rear deck ideal for dawn. Beverages and contemplation. The balance of the legacy was prudently placed with focus on eco-friendly firms and moral enterprise methods. Geographic separation from my parents slowly evolved into sentimental recovery. I started sessions with a counselor expert in familial monetary distress, dissecting the intricate link between affection, finances, and dominance that had formed my formative years. Via this process, I realized that my parents' conduct mirrored their own uncertainties and narrow perspective of achievement rather than any shortfall in me. Wealth amplifies our existing traits, my counselor noted in one especially revealing meeting. Your grandfather's fortune highlighted his kindness and knowledge. Your parents' reaction to the prospect of fortune highlighted their domineering traits, and now your legacy is highlighting your consideration and aim to generate beneficial change. Surprising bonds arose from the familial split. Aunt Clara, who had defended me during the will session, turned into a steady presence in my routine. Uncle George, who had kept courteous space amid my estrangement from my parents, asked me to his garage to refurbish Walter's treasured rowboat. Cousins I'd scarcely known contacted me with ancient anecdotes about my grandfather, broadening my grasp of his existence and heritage. Collectively, we built a selected kin grounded in sincere concern rather than monetary duty or hereditary chance. Our festive meetings were humble versus the ornate occasions my parents once demanded, yet they brimmed with real joy and inclusion. 2 years following Walter's departure, I got a compact parcel from an unknown sender. Within was his faded angling cap and a closed note dated 1 month prior to his passing. The message inside held only a handful of sentences in his recognizable script. Ethan, don this worn cap when you must recall what counts. Genuine riches aren't gauged by currency, but by the liberty to exist per your principles. Your parents might never grasp that the actual legacy I bestow upon you isn't in my financial holdings, but in the model of a life fully embraced. I'm prouder of you than you'll ever realize. Love, Grandpa Walter. I mounted the note in a frame and placed it in my studio where I could view it daily. The angling cap rested on a dedicated peg near the entrance, prepared whenever I required its unique guidance. Regarding my parents, I learned via kin that they'd relocated to Nevada, still recounting to whoever would heed how they'd been deprived of their legitimate legacy. They'd evidently discovered a fresh social group where their account of happenings drew pity, and they'd reverted to their known routine of exploiting facades for gain. I harbored no resentment toward them any longer, merely a serene recognition that certain ties can't be mended when the core comprehension of affection differs so vastly. My grandfather had granted me not merely economic independence, but the superior boon of sentimental release from harmful cycles that had constrained our lineage for eras. The authentic legacy was never concerning the $4.92 million. It was about finally breaking free from the pressures, particularly when finances were at play. I'd appreciate hearing your experiences in the comments section. At times, the toughest conflicts we face are with those meant to care for us deeply. If this tale struck a chord with you, kindly follow to receive more authentic accounts about discovering resilience in tough scenarios. Give a thumbs up if you agree, like my grandfather did, that the greatest legacy isn't counted in cash but in teachings and liberty. Thanks for reading, and keep in mind that kin is about affection and backing, not dominance and scheming. Pass this tale along to someone who could benefit from that reminder right now.